Yo, what's going on, guys? And today, shout out John Hollinger for the top point guards in this year's free agency. If you guys don't follow Tom Hollinger, the Athletic, he does this great job using his board valuations to help determine an idea of what these players are worth. While this method does have some limitations, it values for the coming season only, for instance, and obvious factors like health, attitude, fits aren't taken into account. It provides a 10,000-foot view of the marketplace and what valuations might make sense on a player's contract for next season. Now, with that being said, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think of these contracts? Let me hear them in the comment section down below. Like and subscribe for 150 videos a month. Now, let's go into it. The max guys. Damn. Kyrie, he's worth 48.4. If we saw my last video of the top free agents, he's going to get a deal probably, if he opts out, he's probably going to negotiate something short of the 5-year, $245 million deal he's eligible, even though I know he's turning 31 and he hasn't been available much. The guy averaged 27 points and 59% true shooting. It wasn't even a good year for his standards, so he's kind of worth it. Next up, Jalen Brunson. Look, Dallas could let him walk, and another team could get him well below the max. Now, it seems like any serious offer will have to be at least $100 million. He's looking at getting probably a 5-year or a 4-year deal between $100 and $125 million, which he's a smaller guard coming off a great year, and you wonder if a team like the Knicks or the Pistons are really going to get him. And I think whatever Jalen Brunson goes for, he'll set up the market for Tyus Jones and Colin Sexton. So basically, whenever the domino for Jalen Brunson falls, that will allow the dominoes of Colin Sexton and Tyus Jones to fall because Jalen Brunson will establish their value. Now, Ricky Rubio, he didn't play last year, turned 32, and he tore his ACL in the same knee for a second time that you guys recall that he tore that ACL back in Minnesota. He was awesome. I'm expecting him to get somewhere around the mid-level exception, and that being probably close to $10 million. And I also assume if John Wall joins free agency, if he's bought out, he will also get something close to a mid-level exception. Next up, DeLon Wright. Look, he got the full mid-level exception 4 years ago, and yeah, he's kind of, at best an off-ball three-point shooter who can kind of create for others. But he didn't always play major minutes for Atlanta. But once he started playing, damn, they're cutting the grass outside, and hopefully you guys don't hear them cutting the grass. But he was Atlanta's one of the most effective players on the defensive end. They literally had no one good on the defensive end. And I think on a 1 to 2 year deal, mid-level exception, he's a point guard who could moonlight as a 6'5" shooting guard. But I really think his best value is staying in Atlanta, which is a team that I do think he's gonna stay with. Next up, Tyus Jones, $13 million a year. And he is probably the best backup point guard in the league, the most efficient backup point guard. A guy who I think he's better suited at that point guard role. I think he can be a starting point guard, but not on a championship team. He's not the starting point guard for a championship team. He's a good point guard for a mid-level team, but I think he's a championship backup point guard. But look, the Grizzlies have ample cap space to keep him, but he's probably done being the understudy of John Moran, who's the full-time starter. And if New York, Washington, Detroit, Cleveland, and Dallas, and a few other teams that are all in the Jalen Brunson race. I mean, Washington's kind of not put themselves in the Jalen Brunson race. They put themselves... Also, my tinnitus is going off for a second. I'm hearing like, yeah. But I think if you look at this, I know Jones is undersized and he doesn't really shoot consistently from three. I mean, he's a guy who shoots over 36%. He's 26. He's got a good floater. And I think when you look at him, again, wherever Jalen Brunson goes and how much if Jalen Brunson gets north of $25 million, I think Tyus Jones gets north of 13.7. I think Tyus Jones will get between $10 and $13 million. But again, it all comes down to what Jalen Brunson gets, and wherever Jalen Brunson goes will help determine where Tyus Jones goes. So if he goes to the Pistons or the Knicks, expect the teams that fail to get Jalen Brunson to go after Tyus Jones. Now, Anthony Simons, I thought he would be a bigger commodity, but he isn't. It seems like even though he had this offensive explosion, averaging 22 points and shooting 60% true shooting, and he's only 23, and it seems like the reason why he isn't ranked higher is that he's not a great defender, and he's also not a great creator for others. He's kind of an undersized two guard, and at 6'3" with decent athleticism, you would think that he will get better. I mean, the defense, I think, will never get really that better. I just think he can just be less bad. So it seems like a foregone conclusion that he will be re-signed by the Portland Trailblazers as he's a restricted free agent. And we're assuming that he's going to probably be re-signed for more than he's worth. Now, Eric Bledsoe has a $19.4 million deal coming this season, and it's only guaranteed $3.9. So it's a foregone conclusion that he is going to be released by the Trailblazers. And he's a good back. If DeLon Wright's gone, he's a good option for teams looking for a defensive guy who sometimes has suspect shooting, sometimes has good shooting. Now, Patty Mills has one of the most interesting player option decisions. For $6.18 million, his current contract's a little bit less than what he's actually worth. If he wants to leave, he could probably get closer to $7 to $8 million. So it depends if he wants to really test it or not. Now, John Wall is technically under contract for Houston, but with that player option, he's not going to opt out. But the likelihood of him getting a quick buyout agreement between the team continues to increase. And he looked halfway decent last time we saw. 40 games he played, and he's only played 72 games in the last 4 years. So I'm a huge Raul Neto guy. I know last year his three ball stopped. It was 29%, but he's a career 37% three-point shooter who is a tough defender. He's a guy who good, pretty decent backup. He's not a primary shot creator. He's just kind of a 3-and-D guy. Dennis Schroeder. Look, he's a shoot-first guy, more of a six-man, effective six-man. And Boston got him on the taxpayer mid-level exception, and the board rating pegs him right at that value again, just a mid-level exception guy. Aaron Halda, great point-at attack defender, one of the better perimeter defenders. It's just his shoot-first tendencies and his struggle to shoot from inside the arc kind of screwed him over. But he's a 37.3% career three-point shooter, and the Suns will unlikely issue a $5.8 million qualifying offer to keep him, so it's interesting. Now, Facundo Campazzo was pushed out of the lineup, and you know me, my cousin's name's Facundo Campazzo de Argentina, y yo también soy de Argentina. Oh, mi padre son de Argentina. Yo nací en Minnesota, pero mi hermana mayor y mi padre son de Argentina. Vinieron en el 99. What I just said was my family's from Argentina. I was born in Minnesota, but they came over in 99. And Facundo Campazzo was awesome, but he's a pesky defender. Yes, he's 5'10", and a return to Europe is always possible, but I think he's useful in an up-tempo environment, and one suspects he'll be on a different roster from a year from now, and I could see him being on. If Minnesota did trade Patrick Beverley, watch Minnesota bring in Facundo Campazzo. So then Vasilije Micic is one of the most intriguing players. They're saying he's worth about between $4 or $5 million. He was selected in the same draft class as Gary Harris and TJ Warren and might end up in the league. Yes, his draft rights are held by the Thunder, who probably don't need a roster, the veteran backup point guard, but it's pretty easy to imagine a team trading a second or multiple second round picks for Micic's right and then ink him out of Europe. Javon Carter, the West Virginia Mountaineer, he was a defensive menace, okay? And he showed his value for the Bucks and probably stay on the Bucks. Trent Forrest, value is kind of a good, he's a useful fourth or fifth guard with size and defense, but he's a terrible three-point shooter. He shot 10 career threes at 18.9%. Goran Dragic looked awful, and he looked like he lost a step. Ish Smith is awesome, but he's on a non-guaranteed $4.7 million deal, but that's too much. But he's decent. He's 34, can't shoot, but he's still capable of turbocharging tempo by zipping up and down the court and playing some defense. Rajon Rondo, he's like a third point guard. And then you got Lou Williams. He can't even be a six-man anymore. Alfred Payton doesn't even play defense, really. He does, but he just sucks at everything else. So, his defense sucks. Okay? He's average on defense. He doesn't carry defense anymore. Brandon Goodwin, DJ Augustine, and Ryan Archinio.